Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty interesting today. We're tackling Nassim Taleb's Fooled by Randomness,
Yeah, it's a fascinating look at how we often misunderstand success.
especially in fields like finance. It's so easy to think skill is the main driver.
But Taleb really challenges that. He says, imagine 10,000 investors just picking stocks randomly.
Like flipping a coin.
Right. After 5 years, statistically, you'll have nearly 200 with perfect track records.
They look like Wall Street gurus.
But pure luck can masquerade as genius.
So are we saying even the best investors might just be lucky?
It's not that simple, but Taleb's point is we overemphasize skill and ignore the huge role chance plays.
We want to believe we're in control.
Exactly. And that sets us up to be fooled by randomness, even when we think we're being totally rational.
Which brings us to chapter 1, the black swan problem. Right?
Yeah, he uses that analogy to show how limited our knowledge really is.
Like no matter how many white swans you see.
One black one throws the whole idea of all swans are white out the window.
So past success doesn't guarantee future results.
Exactly. Things change constantly, and what worked before might fail spectacularly tomorrow.
So you're saying even if you had a great run in the market, it's not proof you're a genius.
Right. And that's why Taleb emphasizes being adaptable, questioning your assumptions.
And having backup plans.
Absolutely, because that black swan event, whatever it is, it could be lurking right around the corner.
It's kind of unsettling to think even careful planning might not be enough if some random event throws everything off.
That's why it's called a black swan, rare, impactful, and totally unexpected.
Which actually connects nicely to chapter 2. This idea that even evolution isn't always about survival of the fittest.
Right. Luck plays a huge role there, too.
He uses the QWERTY keyboard as an example, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's not the most efficient layout, but it became the standard because of historical quirks, not because it was superior.
So being first can be more important than being the best.
Sometimes, yeah. It's called path dependence. Early success can lock things in.
Imagine inventing a fantastic keyboard. But QWERTY got there first, just by chance. All that work for nothing.
And it applies to more than keyboards. Companies, careers, technologies.
You're in the right place at the right time, boom, you're set. Even if someone else is more talented, they miss out.
We overestimate the role of skill and underestimate the role of chance.
So we need to acknowledge that luck is a factor.
Being aware of it is the first step. Otherwise, we set ourselves up for disappointment. Or worse, make bad decisions because we think we're invincible.
Okay, this is already making me rethink how much control we actually have.
Yeah.
So moving on to chapter 3, this is where we get into our own minds, right?
Yeah, and how they can trip us up.
Because we're not as rational as we like to think.
We use mental shortcuts, these things called heuristics, to make quick decisions.
Sounds efficient.
It is, but they can lead to biases that distort our thinking.
Can you give an example? So we know if we're falling into these mental traps.
Confirmation bias is a classic one. Say you're convinced a certain stock is going to go up.
You'd only look for news that confirms your belief.
Pretty much. Even if there's tons of evidence suggesting it might go down.
That's dangerous.
We're not being objective. We just look for information that fits our preconceived notions.
So how do you fight that?
It's tough, but being aware of it is a good start. Taleb emphasizes critical thinking, skepticism.
Not just blindly trusting what we want to believe.
Right. Question everything, even your own deeply held beliefs.
So a healthy dose of humility is in order.
Absolutely. Because our brains are incredibly good at fooling us.
It's like we're programmed to be fooled by randomness.
Yeah.
Even on a subconscious level.
Exactly. And it affects everything, not just investing, relationships, political views. Understanding these mental shortcuts is crucial for making good decisions.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. Our brains crave patterns, even in random data.
Right. But it's not just about patterns. It's how we process information, how we deal with uncertainty.
And our emotions play a role too, right? Chapter 4 is all about that.
Yeah, emotions are often overlooked in decision-making.
But isn't that the opposite of rational thinking? Like, don't let your emotions cloud your judgment, right?
There's truth to that. But Taleb argues emotions can be useful too.
Really? How?
He uses the example of Burden's donkey. Stuck between two piles of hay, can't decide, starves to death.
Paralyzed by indecision.
A bit of emotion, a nudge in either direction would have saved it.
So sometimes emotions help us break free from overthinking.
Exactly. They push us to make a choice, even if it's not perfectly calculated.
But like you said before, emotions can also be dangerous, right?
Oh, absolutely, especially under stress. Think about market crashes, people panic selling, driven by fear.
Emotions hijacking the rational mind.
Exactly, so it's a double-edged sword. They can help or hurt.
Finding that balance, knowing when our emotions are serving us well versus leading us astray.
It's not easy, but awareness is key.
Recognizing how emotions influence our choices. That's a big step.
It helps us understand ourselves better and hopefully make better decisions in the long run. It's tricky, right? Because on one hand, emotions can be irrational, but on the other, they're what make us human.
And sometimes that gut feeling can be valuable.
Exactly. It's about understanding ourselves, not just trying to suppress emotions entirely.
Which leads us nicely to chapter 5, hindsight bias. That feeling of, I knew it all along after something happens.
Even though, if we're honest, we probably didn't.
Like after a market crash, everyone's suddenly an expert on what caused it.
Right. Hindsight bias makes us think events were more predictable than they were.
So we're not just bad at predicting the future, we're also bad at remembering how uncertain we were.
We rewrite our own memories to fit the narrative we create after the fact.
That's got to be dangerous, especially in finance.
Oh, definitely. Someone could think they're a stock-picking whiz, but their past successes were just luck.
But because they can explain it now, it reinforces the belief that they knew what they were doing.
And that can lead to overconfidence, taking bigger risks, and ultimately bigger losses.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap? How do we know if we're seeing a real pattern versus just imposing order on randomness? Because our brains love to find patterns, even where they don't exist.
Right, like seeing predictions in the Bible. Taleb talks about that. It's just our pattern-seeking minds at work, finding meaning where there is none.
So how do we separate real insights from illusions?
Taleb doesn't offer easy answers, but he stresses critical thinking, skepticism.
And constantly questioning our own assumptions.
Exactly. Be willing to consider alternative explanations, even if they challenge your beliefs.
A good dose of humility is in order. We might not be as smart as we think we are.
Which brings us to chapter 6, rare events, those black swans we talked about earlier.
The stuff we think will never happen, but then, wham, it does.
And we're totally unprepared because we're terrible at understanding the impact of these rare but significant events.
It makes sense though, right? We base decisions on our past experiences. But what if something completely new happens, something we have no reference point for?
That's when we get blindsided. He uses a gambling example to make this point. Imagine a game, 999 out of 1,000 chance of winning $1.
Sounds pretty good.
But there's a 1 in 1,000 chance you lose $10,000.
Okay, suddenly the stakes are much higher.
Most people would focus on the high probability of winning, but that potential loss.
It dwarfs the likely gain.
We focus on probabilities without fully considering the magnitude of the outcomes.
So it's not just how likely something is, but what happens if it does.
Right. We need to be prepared for those black swan events, even if they seem improbable. Have a plan B. Build resilience into our systems.
Except that sometimes unexpected events are going to mess up our plans.
It's not about living in fear, but acknowledging the reality of randomness and preparing for it as best we can.
This is making me think about embracing randomness in a different way. Not just accepting whatever happens, but understanding the forces at play. Making smarter decisions because of them.
It's a mental shift, a way of looking at the world that's more realistic and less prone to disappointment.
Because we're not setting ourselves up for this illusion of total control, which we never really had in the first place.
Right. We can control our responses to events, even if we can't control the events themselves, which is where Chapter 7 gets interesting.
This is where he talks about the positive side of randomness, right? It's not all doom and gloom.
Exactly. In art and scientific discoveries, even in life itself, randomness can be a source of creativity and innovation.
So instead of trying to eliminate randomness, which is impossible anyway,
We should learn to harness it,
like jazz music, it's all about improvisation.
embracing the unexpected and creating something beautiful out of it.
Or scientific breakthroughs that happen by accident.
Like penicillin.
Hmm.
Sometimes the greatest discoveries are the ones we weren't even looking for.
Instead of fearing randomness, we should be open to the possibilities it presents.
Exactly. And this ties into Stoicism, which Taleb mentions here.
Accepting what we can't control, focusing on what we can.
Finding peace and resilience in the face of adversity, whether it's caused by randomness or something else entirely.
Not giving up, but choosing how we respond to challenges. Finding that inner strength, knowing that some things are just beyond our control.
And that leads us to Chapter 8, where Taleb tackles information overload.
How too much information can actually make us less informed.
Right. We're bombarded with news, data, opinions, and most of it's irrelevant or even misleading.
drowning in information, but thirsty for knowledge.
Exactly. So how do we filter the noise and focus on what's truly important? It's like developing good information hygiene, protecting our minds from all the junk out there,
We need to be more intentional about what we consume, how we process it.
and more critical of our sources. Don't just believe everything you read or hear.
So tune out the noise, focus on the signal.
Exactly. Be discerning. Cultivate a sense of calm and perspective. The world's always going to try to grab our attention.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Fooled by Randomness, what's the key takeaway? What should listeners really remember from this?
I think the most important message is to just be aware of randomness, how much it influences our lives.
We think we're in control, but often we're not.
Right. We overestimate our own skill, underestimate the role of chance.
And that leads to bad decisions, a distorted view of success and failure.
Like we're wearing these rose-colored glasses that filter out the randomness. We think we're more in charge than we actually are.
But once you take those glasses off, you see the world for what it is, a mix of skill, effort, and a whole lot of luck.
And then you can start making more realistic choices. Develop a healthier relationship with success and failure, both of them.
That makes me think about how we judge people, ourselves and others. If success is partly due to luck, does that mean we shouldn't celebrate achievements or strive for excellence?
No, not at all. Hard work and talent still matter. But it's about recognizing that luck does play a role. And not all success is created equal.
So someone who achieves great things but had a ton of lucky breaks along the way, they might not be as skilled or deserving as someone who overcame huge obstacles to reach a similar level.
Right. It's about context. Understanding the role of chance. Not making sweeping judgments based just on outcomes.
We need more nuanced in our thinking, more compassionate.
Exactly. And it also helps us be more forgiving of ourselves when things don't go our way.
Because sometimes you do everything right and still fail.
Right. It doesn't mean you're incompetent. Maybe luck just wasn't on your side.
That's a powerful message, one that can help us all navigate life's ups and downs, a bit more gracefully, a bit more resiliently.
It's a call for humility, for understanding, for a balanced perspective on the role of chance in our lives.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about. Challenge my assumptions, broaden my perspective.
I'm glad to hear that.
I have one final question for our listeners. If success is, at least partly, due to luck, how does that change your view of achievement, both your own and that of others?
It's a question that can lead to some really interesting insights about our values, our priorities, what success even means to us.
It encourages us to look beyond just the outward signs of achievement. Think about chance, effort, resilience, all those factors.
Because life is complex, unpredictable.
And true success isn't just about reaching a goal, but how we handle the journey along the way. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep embracing the randomness of it all.